Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So we're continuing the Champ build, and today we're going to work on the Tolex covering. Now obviously I told you I'd do a little bit of prep to the cabinet in between episodes, and I have painted the inside of the cabinet black. It's not totally necessary, but if you're looking at the amp from the back and you see inside, it's going to look a lot more pleasing to the eye that way, to have everything the same color. Also, I already mentioned to you that I drilled all of my holes in advance, so every hole that goes all the way through the cabinet is actually drilled before I even start the vinyl process. Now the Tolex that I'm going to be using today is standard black Tolex. If you don't know what Tolex is, it's just sort of a textured vinyl with a fabric backing. The fabric is basically what helps it stick to the surface that you're going to attach it to. Now over the years I've tried several different adhesives and I've had mixed results. I've used sprays, solvent-based, brush-on contact cement, and then I've used Tolex glue, which is essentially a water-based contact adhesive. To be honest, I've never found the perfect solution. Almost everything I've used has caused some kind of a lifting at the corners. And I think what I've been missing is a step that I'm going to try today, which is to go ahead and use super glue on each one of my edges and corners. Now looking at the prices of Tolex glue these days, there's a lot of good options on the market from Tubes and More and Mojo Tone and some other places, but I really wasn't happy with any of the prices that I saw there. In looking around at other options, I found a Wilsonart adhesive at Home Depot for under 20 bucks a quart on their website. So that is the solution that we're going to use today, and I'm going to brush it on with a brush. And remember, I can use foam because this is water-based and not solvent-based. Other than it being water-based, it works very similar to any other contact adhesive. You brush it on, you let it dry, and then after a certain period of time you can stick the surfaces together. In my experience, when this stuff is dry, it's no longer tacky to the surface, and it sort of activates when you put the two surfaces together. But they're not exactly going to feel like they have glue on them to your hands. Now I've pre-cut all of my vinyl pieces that are going to go on today. A lot of folks will tell you it's better to try to use one piece, or in my case I probably would have needed two anyway because I've got this cross beam. But I'm going to use a method that Fender used, which is to put the seams right here at the edges on the top and bottom, and it's just going to allow me to work with this stuff a little bit more easier because it's in small pieces. Now the overwrap here on the top is about 1.5 inches. So this side piece here will come over the top about 1.5 inches all the way around to the bottom. Then the piece that you lay in on top is even with the inside edges of your cab. So there's about a 3/4 inch overlap on each side, and it looks really symmetrical because you have 3/4 inch sides. So there's a 3/4 inch side and then a 3/4 inch seam. Now as I'm covering this, I'm going to try to put contact adhesive on every surface that the Tolex is going to touch. My Tolex is going to come all the way to the edge of this unpainted surface here, and then all the way around to the back in a similar way. Alright, so to get started, I'm going to pour some of this contact adhesive into a cup so it's easier for me to get to. And I did shake this up beforehand, but that looked a little bit chunkier coming out than I would have liked, so I'm going to give it a little stir. Alright, well I think that was a false alarm. There's no chunks in it. So what you want here is a nice even layer, and you want everything to look kind of milky white. I usually pay a lot of attention to my edges because I want to make sure I get adhesive all the way up to the edge. Okay, so now we're supposed to let this dry, and I'll go ahead and paint the cab. So while this stuff is drying, I just want to go ahead and mention a couple things. On the top side and on the bottom side as well, I went ahead and marked a center line on each side, and then I transferred that center line to a piece of masking tape that's on my Tolex. So when I go to put this in, or when I put this Tolex on top of this, I'm going to match up that mark. And I've also got a line here of where I want the edge to go. And even just to try to prevent one more mistake, I also wrote the dimensions of the piece that goes on each side on the side that I'm going to attach it, so I can double check that before I do that side. Well, it's been about 5 minutes and this stuff is starting to tack up, but it's not quite done. For full awareness, I did 2 coats on each of the pieces. So I did 2 coats on the Tolex and 2 coats on this cab right here. But I've got to wait just a little bit longer and then we can stick them together. Okay, so I've been cutting my corners and I've been doing that really fast, so I promise I'll show that a little bit slower in a minute. But what I'm going to do with the super glue, I'm going to paint in a line to help me stick these things down. And this is a gel-based super glue, and it's got a brush applicator. Now I'm not going for perfect corners because I've got corner covers for all of my seams, but I want to get them as nice as possible. Alright, so the tools that I'm using here are basically a linoleum roller, and also just to burnish some of the edges I'm just using a plastic putty knife. I've had to work fast here, so I'll try to go back and show you a few more steps as I do the other pieces. I used a Sharpie to color in some of the area where the two parts of the Tolex meet in the corner, just so if I have a small gap there, it's not as easily seen. I didn't do it on the top, obviously, because there's an overlap here, so that seam there will not be seen. Something else that's worth pointing out is when you come up to an edge like this, I just take a utility knife and I just slice it off right along the edge. When I'm all through with the amp, I'll go back and I'll cover up some of this glue or slight scratches from where I've done some trimming. I'll cover all that up with some paint. Something I really wasn't able to show when I was doing this live, when the Tolex wraps a corner like that, it's been a while since I've done this, but I'm starting to remember how it goes. I like to slice the Tolex in a straight line, then you can overlap the two sides and it'll end up looking like that, and you can make a cut like that through both pieces at once and make a perfect corner that way. There's lots of videos out there on how to do Tolex corners, and I'm not paying so much attention on this amp because it's going to have those metal corner covers. It's a little bit of an art form to get Tolex exactly right in a corner. Alright, well, it's a new day and I continue to work on this amp. I've got the centerpiece covered in Tolex now. I'm going to work on the top and the bottom. This is the top piece, and it just goes right in between the two sides. Now, to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous that my head's going to fit in here. With the thickness of this, I noticed it was already tight when I added this, so I may not have left enough space top to bottom to fit the head in. I sure hope I did, but we're going to do this one and then we'll see. It's also worth mentioning, as I cover this piece, you definitely want super glue on any Tolex to Tolex seam, so I've got to put super glue all along the sides on each side of this, as well as the lip as I wrap under, because that's an edge. Well, yo, I looked out and I got it in there. It's a super tight fit, and I wish I'd left another 1/16 of an inch on this bottom or top edge here, but at any rate, it's in there and I'm not going to touch it very much from this point on. I went ahead and bolted it in, and then I've got the handle just kind of loosely attached just to see how things look, but everything's fitting together just fine. There's a trick that I definitely want to show you, how to find your holes and get your holes back in the vinyl for anything that you've drilled all the way through. And I think I'll show you that on these front holes here first. All right, well, here's the trick. I've got myself a steel awl, and I know where the holes are to pass through things like the handle or the top screws or the baffle screws here. And so once you find those spots with your finger, keep a note of where they are. Take your awl and a torch and heat up the tip of the awl, and you can just drop it into the hole and it melts away that old vinyl and it leaves a perfect hole in the vinyl. It works every single time. Alright, so like I said, when you do that, it's going to leave a nice perfectly round hole and one that's not going to peel apart later. I'm going to do the bottom of this next, and then we'll come back whenever all the Tolex is on and we'll install some of the hardware. Oh, you know, I changed my mind. I will give you one more tip before I put this bottom piece on. And that is, if you run a piece of masking tape anywhere you don't want contact cement, when you're doing these areas where I've got an overlap, for example, I want it to come all the way up to this tape but not past. It's not impossible to get contact cement off of a surface that you don't want it on after it's on there, but it's just a pain, so it's a lot easier to just mask it off. And that way you can also mark your center line. So if you've got a piece like this here, you can align your marks and make sure that you get a good wrap on each side. Also, there's one other thing, and it's about dealing with this contact cement. It really needs to dry almost clear. And I've been working with this some, and I kind of forgot about it, and I've kind of remembered it as I've been working with it again. When it's too milky white, it's not dry enough. So it's better to leave it when it's all the way dry and actually somewhat see-through. It says on the instructions that it should be shiny. That's really the best way to adhere them, is when both surfaces are almost clear. You can speed that up a little bit with a heat gun. All the Tolex is on, and I've been attaching some hardware, and I've been adding these corners. And on the bottom side, the corners are also using some feet. So there is a rubber foot installed in one screw of each corner, and then a truss-headed screw on the other side of each corner. Of course, the top ones have 2 truss-headed screws. The truss-headed screws just look better to me than a standard screw because they're kind of a domed shape and they're a little bit wider head. All you do when you install these corners is push them in firmly, make sure you got them in the right spot, and then pre-drill the pilot holes. So here's the cab with all the hardware, and I went ahead and touched up the paint around all the edges where I did some trimming. That completes this cab, so we're going to call the episode here. Next time we'll cover the baffle board and grill cloth, we'll put together the back plates, we'll do the assembly, put the head in, and I think I probably still have a little bit of work to do left on the amp itself. I want to check the bias and maybe some other things. Anyway, that's enough for a whole nother episode, so thanks a lot for hanging out with me on this one. I appreciate all the likes and the comments. Thanks for visiting my description and the links there, because that helps out the channel. I really appreciate you subscribers, and I'll see you guys next time.